On this edition of Independent Sources, Next Generation NYCHA, the Housing Authority under fire to reveal more details of its 10-year plan to revitalize affordable housing in the city. And Jerome Avenue juggle, hundreds of jobs to be lost with the rezoning of one of the poorest neighborhoods in the United States.
Independent Sources, your window to the city's ethnic and immigrant communities. Here's your host, Garry Pierre-Pierre.
Advocates and New York City housing residents are pressing NYCHA to reveal more information about its plans to develop public housing land. The Next Generation NYCHA project was unveiled in 2014 as a two-pronged approach to addressing the authority's financial woes and creating more affordable housing in the city. But there are concerns that 2 years later, the authority is not being very transparent with its plans. Moreover, residents are worried that affordable housing units may lead to areas being gentrified, or even worse, the properties being sold and privatized. With me in studio to discuss some details of this issue is the executive editor and publisher at City Limits, Jared Murphy. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
So Jared, what is the big vision for Next Generation plan?
So NYCHA has a severe money problem, right? I mean, NYCHA is the nation's oldest and largest public housing authority, 178,000 apartments, at least 400,000 residents. And since about the mid-1990s, every level of government has cheated it. You know, the feds haven't given the money it deserved. The state and city have welched on their commitments. And so they have a severe operating expense gap every year and a huge backlog, several $1 billion of capital expenses. And this is what you see when you see stories about elevators not working, bricks falling down, people dealing with mold. In order to try to fill that gap, the city has this Next Generation plan, which has a lot of different parts to it, but one part involves a kind of symbiosis with the mayor's affordable housing program. The idea is that program needs land, NYCHA needs money, so you combine the two, take some of the areas that are referred to by the city as underused at housing developments, parking lots, playgrounds, open space of some sort, and construct new buildings. These buildings would be leased to private entities but not owned by them, or the ground would not be owned by them. And they'll have either 100% affordable units or 50-50, a mix of market and affordable. The idea being this will create some of the units required for the mayor's housing plan and also generate some lease payments that will help NYCHA with its chronic capital deficits. That money would then ideally go to repair some of the developments that already exist where this new housing is being located.
So this is a perfect public-private partnership. So how is the city not being transparent? What are the residents' concerns here?
Well, there are a few different levels of it. The city NYCHA has said there are about 80 different developments, or 80 that are in strong neighborhoods where they could be developed. But they've only revealed a very short list.
Like 3 or 5?
I think we know 6 to this point. And those encompass a few hundred units, but overall we're talking about 10,000 units. So we don't know exactly where this is going to occur. In the places where we do know it's going to occur, like Wyckoff Gardens in Fort Greene or in Bayram Hill, for instance, the concern there is that they know it's coming, but they don't know exactly who's bid on the project. They want to know more about what kind of revenue NYCHA actually expects to get. The estimates at this point have been very broad and kind of vague, and what kind of repairs that money will be spent on, and also exactly what the affordable housing component will look like. You know, as is true of the debate more largely about affordable housing in the city, the question is how low will it go? You know, affordable housing is pegged to different income groups, and some of those income levels, because of the nature of income in the city, are well ahead of where people are actually earning in terms of these neighborhoods. So the question is, you know, what will affordable housing, in quotes, look like in these particular contexts?
So speaking of public housing, you know, many New Yorkers don't remember that these housing developments or projects were a way station for people towards the middle class. What is it like today? Is it a permanent situation for folks, or do we still see that trajectory?
Right. I mean, it's a massive system, right? So it's hard to describe it in one kind of phrase. There is some churning. People do move on, you know, through death and through movement, the other things that move on in life. But the people do live there permanently because affordable housing is hard to get in New York. I think that ideal of it being a transitional form of housing was pretty short-lived and probably applied to a fairly small number of people. When you have a good apartment in New York, you like the neighborhood, it's solid, there's very little reason to move. And contrary to kind of the national stereotype about public housing, for all the problems it had, NYCHA was always among the best managed public housing in the country and was basically successful. In fact, there are neighborhoods in New York that were stabilized by the public housing built in its midst.
So what's the next step for the city in pushing this project forward? I mean, I know the residents have serious concerns. Is the city listening to those concerns, or they're just saying, we're in charge and we got this?
They are listening, and they're listening more than the past administrations. Mayor Bloomberg also had a development proposal for NYCHA. It was called the infill plan. Very little stakeholder engagement, very little attempt to even tell the community what was planned. The de Blasio administration has taken a different approach. They have had stakeholder meetings, they've had a lot more outreach. The question is, how far does that listening process go? At what point do they say, thank you for your input, and at what point do they kind of incorporate that? That remains to be seen. In Wyckoff Gardens, for instance, that I mentioned, there's a stakeholder committee. They may have an advisory role in deciding which developer gets to take that project on, but exactly what that advice will consist of, how it be received, that remains to be seen.
Now, the public sector, when they put money into a project, naturally they want to return an investment. What are they looking for? And I guess this is one of the concerns that the residents have, because if these people put a lot of money, develop, beautify these housing projects, they want get top dollars for them. And where does that leave the residents? Is that, from your reporting, the majority of the concerns lie right there?
I think so, yeah, particularly in developments that are going to be 50-50, because the way those developments work is the affordable housing units are cross-subsidized by the market units. So you're a market renter, you come in and pay top dollar, and some of the excess from that goes to subsidize the apartment for someone who's income targeted. So the lease payments to the city will be factored into that. The private developers certainly will be looking to get a return. And I think that's part of the concern is what happens, and this is true of all the questions about affordable housing in the city and development, when you bring in people who earn a higher income, what is the broader effect on a neighborhood? What's the secondary effect of having more affluent people sort of plop down in the middle of moderate and low-income people? There are a lot of conflicting opinions about that, a lot of conflicting research, but that is one of the fears. What happens when you bring those folks in? How does that change the neighborhood? Does suddenly your supermarket begin charging you for prices you can't afford? Does it begin offering food you don't recognize or want? That's a big part of the fear, I think.
In the short term, NYCHA faces some financial challenges. How is the mayor, the administration, handling the situation?
So Mayor de Blasio has, I think, done a fair amount that Mayor Bloomberg didn't. NYCHA used to pay the city for its sanitation collection. It was about $70 million a year. Same for NYPD protection. They actually paid for that. De Blasio has ended those payments, and that has helped NYCHA in the short term with some of its operating deficits. But the math problem NYCHA faces is much greater than that. You have a huge system of aging buildings that are primarily dependent.
Can you give us a scope? How many buildings, how many residents live in NYCHA houses?
So on record, it's about 178,000 apartments and 400,000 residents. But it's widely assumed that there are many more people than that, people doubling up. So at least 500,000. Maybe more than that. When you lump in Section 8, basically you're talking about a city the size of Boston living in NYCHA-controlled or funded apartments. The problem for New York is that our system has survived here while public housing nationwide has died. And so New York is increasingly isolated as a federal case in terms of needing support from Washington. So it's very difficult for people at NYCHA to look to Washington and think they're going to get the help that they've been denied. And that's why NYCHA is looking inward to things like using its asset of land to get some revenue. But when you get down to individual neighborhoods and projects, that's where the questions get more difficult.
Do they have any other plans to get money?
Oh, certainly. I mean, they have looked to activating commercial spaces in the ground levels of some of their buildings. But one of the things you notice in big NYCHA campuses is you have to walk like more than 5 minutes to get a cup of coffee, which should be like against the law in New York City, right? One of the great rights of living in the city. They've also looked at things like improving some of their management systems to find efficiencies, having their repair staff be on tap more hours of the day so that problems don't fester and get more expensive. And also things like collecting rent. There's a kind of a poor rate of rent collection at NYCHA. probably not due to people not being willing to pay, but just folks not being asked regularly. And so they've worked to improve that as well.
Now, you mentioned Bloomberg quite a bit. In your opinion, did he drop the ball in this case?
I think he realized late in his term that NYCHA was a problem. You know, he did give a large dose of city funding toward the end of his days. And I think the infill program that he had was an effort to try to respond to this, but it really wasn't on his radar screen for the most part. I think it was, you know, a large entity that the assumption always was in the city and the state, the feds would take care of it. And it became increasingly clear over his term that the feds were not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we come back, bringing attention to a rezoning effort in the Bronx that could leave hundreds unemployed. Thanks for staying tuned. A group of 8 photographers is bringing attention to the impending loss of roughly 1,500 jobs along Jerome Avenue in the Bronx, after it was revealed that the area will be rezoned into a mixed-use residential site. The 2-mile stretch that aligns with the elevated 4-train tracks is now lined with mostly auto shops, garages, and warehouses. The Jerome Avenue Workers Project is an effort to document the lives of some of the people who will be affected as this rezoning takes place. I spoke to Jesus Emmanuel, a member of the Bronx Photo League. The league is spearheading this project. So Jesus, tell us about the Jerome Avenue Workers Project.
Well, Jerome Avenue Workers Project is a project made by 18 photographers in the Bronx. We went out looking for documenting the people who works and live in Jerome Avenue. The purpose was because we find out that the city was trying to, well, the city is trying to rezone this area, and the causes of the rezoning, it will be like all these workers will be affected, losing their job, or probably relocating to another side or the Bronx or another city. We went outside looking for these stories. We found a lot of people who works and live. And we just did an interview and a photography with Hasselblad.
Okay. So what is it that you wanted to preserve or show people? Because rezoning, redevelopment has been a big part of the city for the last 2 decades. And so why did you want to show people?
I think it's because I care. We care. Because we live in the Bronx. And anything that happens in our community, we need to react to it. And just like understanding that people that I see every day, that I live with every day, is going to be affected with this project. I feel motivated to tell this story to the world, to the city, you know, to people to see what's going to happen to these people. I think it's very important for me as an artist to express what my community is feeling.
Mm-hmm. And so are people going to lose their jobs or going to be displaced?
It's going to be both, I think. A lot of people, I think this place is because people who live there is going to be like, the rent is going to be up. So these people have to like look for new options of living. And relocated is because people who work over there that not necessarily live there has to look for another kind of job when these people already are making a living from what they're doing in Jerome Avenue.
Now let's take a look at one of the prints, one of the photographs that you took about this man who works at a tire shop. So talk to us about what motivated, what's the essence of this photograph?
Well, actually, I didn't took this picture. This picture was made by D. Is one of the photographers in the group. He went out, as all of us, he went out looking for this story. He met Jose Cruz, that is a tire technician. The special thing about this picture is, first of nothing, he was very happy to talk with us about the situation. But another thing is the story behind him. He's a Salvadorian. He left the Salvador because there's the civil war that was going on in his country. And after that, he came to New York and started working. And this is one of the jobs that he only knows how to do. Mm-hmm. So he's going to be affected by the project, and he might have to look for another kind of job if he can find the same job of like repairing tires.
And let's look at the one that you actually took. And let's talk about him.
This guy is once is I found him in Burnside and Jerome Avenue. He's a street vendor. He sells incense, all this holistic product that you could find on the street. I remember that afternoon when I photographed him, looking for, subjects or people to talk about the rezoning. And I found him in the street, and for me it was very peculiar because the way he looked, like photographically, was very, it could create like an impact. But I remember that the time that I went closer to him, asking him to do this, he rejected. He's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. And I kind of feel like,
You're taken aback by it.
Right. And then I was like, waiting to see if he kind of feel like, another kind of way to give me this interview and this photograph. But later on, he gave me the opportunity. He kind of asked me like, what you want, what you interested in this for. So we talk about a little bit where he come from and all that. And then later I took the picture, and the crazy part of taking the picture was that in that moment, Burnside Avenue was like around 3 p.m. where everybody come out from the train, the sidewalk is busy. So for me as a one-handed person and somebody who need to do this like right away because he's busy working, for me it was magical just to have my camera and do all this in 1 second.
Now, some people think that the other side of this is that it will bring jobs, it will improve the quality of the neighborhood. This is one of the poorest congressional districts in the country, and that, trying to beautify the poverty while they can understand it, but they just think it's really important that this rezoning happens. How do you answer those critics?
Well, creating jobs is something that it could be very difficult to really accept, because how you gonna build, a strip that is made by all these industrial, companies, businesses, is mostly by auto shops, this kind of like businesses. So if you're gonna create new businesses, you have to create businesses that identify this person. This person can know how to do and keep doing what he was doing, right? So another side, let's see the residential side, like they planning to build, how do you call it?
Affordable housing?
Affordable housing. So we need to look what affordable means. Like when there's people over there that they probably make $20,000 a year. So that's gonna be affordable, like for them. Are you sure? Like, if we see the history of like this gentrification stuff going on, we see like in Brooklyn or probably other sides of
Parts of Queens, yes.
Right. We don't see these people in this planning because they don't make what they mean by affordable.
So in many ways, your project is really to bring to light
awareness.
Okay.
Yeah, it's to bring awareness. Like these people being here first, they developed the area first. They've been working all this time, and they still working over there. So don't pull them out. This is the people that I live with every day. For me, it will be very sorry to see these people gone. Like I want to see them progress also.
So beyond the book, how are you guys promoting the book? City officials, people in the planning department who are in charge of that, are they aware of the project, and is it resonating with them?
They are aware. We've been in a lot of like, communities, reunions, where the officials were there, so they kind of know we were doing this. Other than that, the exhibition opens right in Jerome Avenue. It was a big exhibition. A lot of people came to see it.
So where can people find the book?
They could find it on JeromeAveWorkers.com. I think it's a special book because there's not something done like this by 18 artists together making something for our community. I think it's a piece of history, and everybody should have something like that.
Well, thank you very much, Jesus.
Thank you.
Good luck with the project.
Thank you, brother.
Still to come on the show, making a new space for artists of color by revamping an old idea. finally, from us, there's an effort afoot to revitalize a nonprofit that's been helping artists of color since 1974. En Foco, Inc. was inspired by the civil rights movement and has been assisting artists with staging exhibitions and highlighting their work with their magazine, Nueva Luz. I spoke to En Foco's co-founder, Bill Aguado, about why the organization was still necessary. Before that, we'll take a look at Judith Escalona's piece about Frank Gimpaya's exhibit that was organized by En Foco.
What began as a teachable moment ended as an exhibition of photographic works by Frank Gimpaya, a photographer who began as a painter and illustrator.
One of my students at St. Peter's University showed me her journal, and she had images of Seurat drawings. So I'd asked her if she had actually seen the work, and they were being exhibited at the time at the Museum of Modern Art. And so she said no, and I said, well, this is an experience, let's go down and take a look at them.
Gimpaya was captivated by one specific graphite drawing by Seurat.
It was called The Veil, and it's a woman, and her face is hidden by a veil. It was bold, and it was saying, I exist. You can't really see me, but I exist. She becomes a kind of vital force, which Seurat, although he controls, the pencil and the wonderful graphic imagery, the texture of the paper, she's in control in a way. And he's just a sort of an instrument to kind of reveal that energy.
Gimpaya decided to use Seurat's veil in his photography class. He created a tableau, a photograph emulating the drawing, as part of a lesson, and asked his student to model for it.
For me, she's a presence. She really has there's a force, her demeanor, just her posture, whether that can be seen as an anxiety or a kind of defiance in some of these images, but you can't really look away.
Instead of a cloth veil, he substituted a reflective mylar mask. The one tableau morphed into an entire series of photographs, capturing the subtle changes in light and movements of his student.
Not only is her face different, but also the mask changes depending on the light that's coming in, and also depending on the shadow that it's picking up. And there's actually about 140 frames of her different expressions. These are but a few of those.
As curator, Marisol Diaz worked with Gimpaya in selecting the photographs. Diaz herself is the photographer and former program director of En Foco.
We would do about 5 shows a year when I was there. And then there was a program called New Works, which has changed now, but that promoted artists as well by giving them a major show.
Mask was presented by En Foco, a photography organization founded in 1974 to present the work of photographers of color through exhibitions, workshops, and its magazine, Nueva Luz. En Foco is currently reinventing itself under the leadership of William Aguado. Frank Gimpaya's Mask exhibition and the redesign of Nueva Luz magazine are part of that initiative. Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
So, Bill, is En Foco still necessary today?
It's probably more necessary now than it has ever been. Everyone knows that being an artist in today's world is really challenging. Being an artist of color is almost unheard of. Mm-hmm. So by us being able to promote through Nueva Luz, through our fellowship program, it is a competitive process that is adjudicated by professionals in the field so that the best artists are selected. Mm-hmm. This year, through the generosity of an anonymous donor, 5 awards of $1,000 apiece were awarded. They will be exhibited at NYU November 17th. Mm-hmm. Next year, we expect to have 10 awards of $1,000. The best thing that we can do as a community arts organization of color, is to invest in our community. Not only invest in the artists, but make sure the artists come back to the community.
You know, it's interesting because when you talk about education in the schools, whenever the budget constraints, the first programs that seem to get cut are the arts and photography type of things. And your organization is trying to fill that void.
Well, you know, it's as was mentioned, En Foco was founded in 1974. The other dynamic aspect of En Foco is that they have accumulated over 800 images of different artists of color since 1974. It is essentially a documentary on life in New York City and life in other communities of color throughout the country.
Okay, great.
What do we do with that? How do we use it to educate and not forget? What I saw was important for En Foco, not to become a footnote in the cultural history, but to be alive and to be as relevant as it has ever been.
Okay, great. So tell us about Nueva Luz. It's called a photographic journal.
Well, that issue of Nueva Luz is focused on three Puerto Rican women of the South Bronx, who came together because not only artists of color have trouble, but since it's male-dominated, women of color have even more trouble. Mm-hmm. So they have a double challenges. And these women were sought to redefine themselves what the role of the woman is in the Puerto Rican home, in Puerto Rican culture. There's Raina Santos talks about, documents Islamic women, Muslim women who are Puerto Rican. Mm-hmm. And there's a growing trend towards Latinos and Puerto Ricans converting to the Islamic belief. She has done an extraordinary job of documenting Puerto Rican women here in the Bronx. Sandra Ayala focuses on religion and how it relates to her life and what her perceptions are. Mm-hmm. And the last one, Lizzie, is about a young woman, mm-hmm. how she feels about herself. Mm-hmm. You've never seen this type of coverage, this type of work in any gallery or any museum, but you see it here. And our goal is to promote artists of color. Okay.
So how has your constituent changed over the years? In '74, when you guys started, who were the members in Foco, and today?
Well, you know, it's very interesting how cameras back then, 35 millimeter film, mostly black and white, the artists could process the films themselves. It was black and white. Color was another challenge. And you bring it up to the day, it became. Then you had automatic cameras. Then you had the DSLR cameras, point and shoot cameras. And you know what you have now is camera phones. Mm-hmm. And as the technology evolves and everyone is using the camera phone, we have a whole new audience that we can reach. Sure. And we have just started to explore the creative application of this camera phone. Mm-hmm. But what we're looking for is the voices of the community, okay, to be exhibited, to be promoted, whether on a wall like here or online.
So speaking of online, where can people get a copy of this magazine?
You have to email info@enfoco.org.
Okay. Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Good luck with the program.
Well, I hope you come see one of the exhibits.
I certainly will. Yeah. That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.